My children think I get paid to yap for a living because I'm always on the phone.
Alrighty, let's jump into a property manager AMA. So, for anyone who's listening for the first time or has been listening for a little bit, they probably don't know what we do in our day to day. So, we're going to be rolling through a few episodes where we go through some frequently asked questions. And first one on the hot seat is going to be Skye, who is our resident property manager. Let's kick it off with, I'd say it's an easy one, but it's also really misunderstood. What does a property manager actually?
It is absolutely misunderstood. Most people think we just collect rent and occasionally call the tradie, but it's a whole operational, legal and people wrangling circus, and I'm the ringmaster in the middle. So I'll break it down a little bit in terms of each stage of the journey. Most people would think about leasing the property, sounds like finding the tenant. But there's a lot more that goes into putting up a real estate ad. I'm very strategic with my marketing, and there's a number of different plays throughout that marketing process to make sure that we're actually getting the results that we want, checking applications, making sure we don't get a tenant who on paper might have looked good, but if you dig a little bit deeper, that's a fake payslip. If you dig a little bit deeper, their addresses don't line up. You can glance at an application and without the experience behind it, you can easily get burnt. There's the marketing part of it, plus verifying the tenancy to make sure that it's a good tenant, because a poor tenant can cost many, many thousands and months and stress and all sorts of things you don't want when investing. And then we need to advise landlords on what rent to set. And again, that's very strategic because you get the price wrong and you're exposed to weeks of vacancy, which hurts your bottom line. And sometimes you can get it wrong. And if you aren't quick to react, then you can stay on the market for longer and with an empty property, and no one wants empty property because the whole point is to get that money coming in. So it's not about getting the most amount of rent. There is a very fine balance between getting market value but attracting a good tenant at the same time, because good tenants won't overpay for a property. They know they're good tenants. There's a lot of work that goes into what price we need to advertise the property at. And then we've got a tenant, then we're talking about managing the tenancy. So again, this is where the assumption is we just sit back and collect the rent.
Don't you?
No. There's generally a lot of emotions tied in this part of the journey to not only just the tenant, because that's their home, it's where they live, but the landlord may or may not have an emotional attachment to the home. And we've got to balance the legal rights of both parties and make sure that everyone's doing the right thing. A lot of difficult conversations, and where things go wrong is where either landlords can't have the difficult conversation with their self-managed tenant, or you've got an inexperienced property manager who is afraid to have a difficult conversation, and that creates bigger problems down the track. I'm very quick to ruin people's day with a difficult conversation, but I would rather have it now than ignore it and I have a bigger problem later.
What's an example of a difficult conversation?
Really basically, let's say I go do a routine inspection and 90% of the property is great. But there's one little thing that they haven't done. Let's say there's a bit of build up to the shower screen glass. Like that might seem really minor, and the tenant might be like, really? Like everything else is great. But I know if we don't action that now and we just let it go and they vacate in 2-3 years' time, if that build up on the shower glass is left, it can etch into the glass, and then we're looking at a shower screen replacement. This is a really common one, particularly in South Australia, because our water's so hard. When I have people move from another state, they're not familiar with that because it's SA problem. It's not that they're not cleaning their shower, but our water is actually not great for the glass. So I'll be very quick to say, hey, look, this is the situation. Just get this product and get it resolved. And that way they're not paying for a new shower screen at the end of their tenancy. And then the landlord's getting their asset maintained. So I think less experienced property managers would absolutely be uncomfortable pointing that out. It's not a fun conversation to have because mostly their inspection was great. I feel really mean picking on these little things, but it's for the long-term view. And I'm 24/7. So at 11 p.m. when someone's got water leaking through a roof, it's not the landlord they're calling, it's me. That's the hidden things that I do that landlords don't really see the benefit of when they're like, how much are your fees? There's all this other stuff that goes into it. That's the bulk of it. Managing repairs and maintenance.
That's a big one, right?
a key one. And the key distinction too is helping landlords understand that repairs and maintenance are actually two different things. Repairs are something that we have to do. The tenants reported it. We have to fix something that's broken. Maintenance is where someone with experience can benefit. For example, if I start to see deterioration to eaves or gutters, that's indicating we're going to have an issue in the future. That's something we might need to action now to save a bigger expense down the track when that comes inside, and then you've got ceiling leaks and replastering. The maintenance side are the things that I will recommend to landlords to save them money in the long run. They might not do it, but I know I'm doing my job in protecting their asset. Legal and compliance is fairly obvious. A lot of landlords misunderstand how much work goes into that, particularly with all of the reforms that have rolled out nationally. There's been a lot of changes, and to be honest, the governing bodies don't even really understand it themselves. It's one of those things that we're constantly making sure we're staying compliant, because one wrong move could cost you 20 grand for a fee. I don't want anyone to see that.
Have the changes been good overall for landlords and tenants?
They are ridiculous. One example is we're not allowed to ask a tenant their date of birth on an application anymore, because that was seen to be quote unquote discriminatory. But they have to give us identification. Now I've got to go look at the identification and go, okay, I think this person's 35. Just a simple admin thing, because they don't want to be discriminating against tenants, but the common sense was not applied. So there's a number of reforms that look like that. I would say if I wasn't sitting in a room with two men, that men obviously wrote this legislation. It's definitely something that you want an expert who understands the compliance around managing your investment property, because it's not something that a landlord should have to be across, but the professional you pay should be.
Mm-hmm. In summary, it's looking like you're in charge of the marketing process for the landlord, the ongoing communications, rent collection, follow-up with the property in general. Repairs and maintenance is something that you help with, and then you've got the legal and compliance aspect of it. So it sounds like you do a lot more than just collect rent.
Way more. And it's the constant communication between both parties, because both parties are on opposite sides of the fence, and I need to try and get them to meet in the middle. Balancing those communications sometimes can be very challenging. I personally also focus on asset growth. So not only maintaining the asset, but ensuring that we're maximizing returns where possible. We're not investing money on things in the property that aren't going to generate a return. So there is a lot more than just collecting rent.
No, I think that's awesome. And I definitely want to pick your brain more about maximizing value. The one that kind of sticks out, and a lot of people ask me about this all the time, is the eviction process. Have you ever had to evict someone, and what actually happens? What lets you do it? I think there's this misconception out there that you can just walk in and evict someone willy-nilly, but also that property managers are just horrible people who will go and evict people just for the sake of it.
Yeah, and turf them out on the street, and we love it. No, it's actually horrible. And in 20 years, I've only done it once.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, as in actually had the bailiff there. There was one other occasion that we had been given vacant possession orders, but they knew what was up and they left before we attended with the bailiff to change the locks. But the actual process to get an eviction is ridiculously hard, particularly now. It used to be easier 5 years ago. When I say easier, we're not actively trying to kick people out, but if you don't pay rent, the old saying was, if you don't pay, you don't stay. Now, if you don't pay, you get to stay. It's really, with the housing crisis, they're not trying to end tenancies, they're trying to sustain them. So that's really challenging for a landlord who's not receiving rent. So I took on a property from a self-managed landlord who had a tenant not paying rent, and I had to come in and fix it and either get the rent paid or get the tenant out. And it took many, many months to actually get a vacant possession. And on the day that we got the vacant possession, we arrived with the bailiff and the locksmith. She knew this was coming. She was very aware. Multiple times she was given chance after chance to pay the rent. She was aware of the consequences of what would happen if she didn't pay the rent, and she didn't. So we arrived with the bailiff and the locksmith, and she immediately said she was going to stick her dogs on us. And we could hear a dog barking inside, so she wouldn't open the door. We can obviously change the lock from the outside, but given the threat, the bailiff's like, call the police. Short version, we ended up with about 8 police on site. It was like a hostage standoff situation. And this is like my only eviction where I've had to actually physically remove someone from a property. Turns out they had a few outstanding warrants as well, hence why we had a number of police there.
A detective by accident.
It was full of drama. They eventually opened the door and went with the police, but it was very, very awkward, and she's screaming all sorts of obscenities at me because it's my fault that she didn't pay her rent. But yeah, that was a whole day thing. I think we got there at 10. I don't think we left until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm not saying they'd all be like that, but the police are trying to de-escalate a situation and they want to not have further difficulties. But the thing that got me with the landlord, they're paying that locksmith to be there for that whole time.
Oh, okay, yep.
So it was a very expensive day for the landlord. So while the police were trying to do that, also I'm keeping an eye on the time going, this locksmith charges a set rate per hour. And he couldn't do what he needed to do until they got out of the property.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what I'm hearing is that to actually evict someone is a really difficult process that has a lot of legal steps that need to be taken along the way. It's not like you can just rock up and be like, okay, you're out.
No, absolutely not. And I think they were a few $1,000s in arrears by that point. So if your tenant's not paid, say, $400 of arrears, like, good luck. You won't get a vacant possession. Like, you need to be in a really bad situation for them to actually issue those orders, and even to follow up and get the bailiff for those orders is not that simple.
Back to your previous point about tenant selection and screening being really important, right? In this situation, you inherited the property and had to deal with what you were handed, but that's where I feel property managers add so much value.
Yeah. Don't self-manage.
Yeah. If nothing's going wrong, it's not because your property manager's not doing anything. It's actually because your property manager's doing a lot. Pete, have you got a question that you want to throw at Skye from your list that might be chilling there?
Yeah, I'll quickly mention self-managed stuff before we go on. I've done that in the past. Never again. Yeah, never again.
You're the problem.
The only reason was because the tenants had been there 10 years and had been privately managed. And there was some works there that needed to be done, which I didn't really want to do. They kind of fixed it themselves. They were just happy living there. And if I inserted a property manager, it would have made it a bit uncomfortable for them. But what I did find was I built a bit of a relationship with them, like a friendship sort of thing. So I found it really difficult to have the hard conversations around rental increases or any kind of even maintenance and repairs that I did want to do. I didn't want to throw them out because they were just, not throw them out, so to speak, but put them out in terms of their day because they would go and fix things. But I'd want to do it properly, but I knew they were going to take a bit of offense to that. And just the whole legal side of stuff too. As the laws are constantly changing, I knew pretty quickly I probably wasn't up to speed with what was going on. So I only really self-managed for 2 years before I had to pull the plug and get a property manager in. Yeah, it's just something that I'd never do again. But my question would be, if you were investing with only 500 grand, what suburbs would you buy in?
I think the best suburb you can buy in, we all know what a high demand suburb is. And you can probably speak to this too, Pete, but from the rental side of it, I tell people to go have a look at what's currently available for rent. If the suburb does not have a lot of properties available for rent, that would indicate higher demand. And it's not necessarily about getting the most amount of rent, but it's that people really want to live there. They're not moving often. They're staying put, which is generally what we want with a long-term investment. Without naming specific suburbs, because I'm probably biased, you want to buy where people want to live. It's not about buying the cheapest thing in the cheapest suburb. If there's 15 properties available in that suburb, they're mostly, say, all units. That would indicate a really high turnover, transient sort of nature. That's not what we want with long term. We want people to stay.
Well, yeah, you'd see that a lot, right, Skye? With your landlords being There'd be some people who would buy those units in those higher turnover areas, and you're relisting them every 6 to 12 months, trying to find new tenants and their out-of-pocket marketing costs, relisting, all of those sorts of things, compared to the set and forget that might have been, let's say, more expensive to buy, or the rental yield is lower, so they're making less rent, but they're saving on all of these costs in terms of being in a high demand area, right?
Yeah. Using a suburb comparison, let's say we have a unit in Unley.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to not use a suburb that any of us live in. And then we have a suburb in, say, Elizabeth. Fact is, Elizabeth is where people might start or they might stay, but it's generally a lower demand area than, say, Unley, because that's the blue chip suburb. So it's the yield that you talk about. Like, yes, it might cost you more to get in, but if you don't weigh in those costs of someone who lives in Unley, lives there for the lifestyle, they're staying put, they're not going to be moving, trying to upgrade to a better suburb or any of that. So that's what I would focus on, just where the demand is, because that's going to get you the most amount of rent naturally and a long-term tenant.
Mm-hmm. Demand's probably a really good segue. When you're looking at listing a property and marketing a property, what makes a rental property actually good from a tenant's point of view? Forget the landlord for a second, which I know might be a little bit difficult. Putting your tenant eyes on, what makes it appealing for them? What are the properties that you'll get double, triple the amount of applications for? What have they got in common?
Aesthetics. I can't say this enough. And this is probably...
They got to be pretty?
They have to be pretty. I think this is more important now than what it was 5 years ago. And I've said this before and I'll say it till the day I die, because people keep renting out ugly properties. Would you want to live in it? Average rent in Adelaide, I think our median is $640 a week. If I'm paying $640 a week, I want a nice space to live in. And people, landlords, grossly underestimate that. Taking out personal design opinions, I see so many rental properties with strong colours on the walls, like reds, greens, like just go neutral.
The early 2000s feature wall that's bright green.
Oh, the feature wall. The feature wall kills me. And then the paint effects, it just dates property. Don't do it. And I appreciate you might not have 10, 15 grand to upgrade the kitchen or the bathroom, but you can still do minor cosmetic updates that I think landlords don't see the value in doing, because they're like, well, I'm not living there. Yeah, but someone has to live there. Make it nice, make it pretty, and just keep it neutral, please. Like colours. Or if you do colours, know what you're doing and don't use ugly colours, because people will literally look at it and go, ooh, don't want to live there. As much as there's a housing crisis, over a certain price point, people have choice. Good tenants have choice. They live somewhere nice to get value for all the money that they're paying.
We've actually shifted where we look for clients now. We don't really love the 3-bed, 1-baths anymore, particularly in markets where there's quite a few rentals, because they're the ones that are staying up the longest.
People want these 2 bathrooms?
Yeah, minimum 2 now. It really depends. If you're looking for like a development site, different story. But if you're just looking for the set and forget, the second bathroom is now more important than ever. And that's what we look for. Double garage if possible too.
That's a bare minimum of what tenants expect these days. Dishwasher, bare minimum. They want the things that might be considered a luxury. Like, it is a luxury to have 2 bathrooms. I don't know about you, but my parents grew up 5 people in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. We all grew up with much smaller footprints of houses, and now we want the biggest and the best. But tenants definitely want that, because if I'm going to pay this, I at least want a nice space.
And it's only going to get harder to rent those 3-bed, 1-baths out as well, with everything going on around the development space too. So if you're finding it hard now, it's going to be a lot harder in the future too.
There's ways people can improve that though. If you've got a stock standard courtyard, there's nothing exciting about it. I'll be perfectly honest. Sometimes I get those. I'm like, oh, how am I going to write the property ad? Because I've got nothing to sell here. There's little upgrades you can do, like add on solar, add in a dishwasher.
Fake grass.
Give it a coat of paint, do some landscaping. There's things you can do to make those boring properties more appealing from an aesthetics point of view. That is such a basic thing that people don't get. Oh, lighting is massively overlooked when it comes to rental properties.
And Skye, correct me if I'm wrong, but those little livability changes, they're the difference between a tenant sticking around for 6 months versus 5 years, right?
Yeah, and they might not even verbalize that, but it's a
Mm.
subconscious thing. They either will vote with their feet and they won't show up at the open when it's available for rent, or they'll look around and find a nicer property to live in if they're currently in your boring, ugly investment.
Well, you walk in and you're already at a
Well, bad
disadvantage.
saying that, but landlords can have this attitude, oh, it'll be all right, it'll get rented.
Will it?
More care needs to be given, as in, yes, we'll rent it, but will they stay? They're definitely not paying a good price for it. Just think about it a bit smarter.
And I think as rates now are coming down and home loan repayments are getting more affordable for existing homeowners, but also people looking to enter the market, if they can get in and the difference between their mortgage repayment and their rent isn't as high anymore, they'll just look at it and be like, well, fuck it, why aren't I buying?
Yeah.
From
And
my
they're
perspective,
I can paint that ugly orange wall.
for a landlord, it could be the difference between, like you said, painting that ugly wall and getting a high quality tenant in and their property being completely ignored.
Absolutely. Yep. Make it pretty. Number one advice.
What else? If you were to give rapid fire another 2 or 3 things that are actually amazing from a tenant's point of view, besides super pretty, practical and aesthetic, what else would you say?
Smart locks. Get rid of keys entirely. Makes tenants' lives easier, makes my life easier. Keys are annoying. They're like $400. They're not expensive. And it's just a little fun add-on that people go, oh, that's cool. I don't need a key. You can do a lot of smart home activations that I think is going to be a trend in the coming years. Even down to, I automated all my lights. I love it. You can do that fairly inexpensively. And if a tenant walks in and they've got a smart lock and all voice activated lights, that's kind of fun. I'd be like, oh, that's cool. Even if you've got that boring property. Yeah, some low cost little wins that I think will set you apart from the rest.
Smart locks and smart lights. I love that. Pete, good way to loop you in as well. You mentioned earlier the 3-bed, 1-bath is kind of dead. When you're looking for investor stock for your clients, what would you say does also stand out for them? Skye's given us the tenant's point of view. What are the non-negotiables from the purchaser's side of things, the landlord side of things?
I think it's position on the street and proximity to things that people think are good, but they're not so good. So people think it's good to be right near a school because tenants are going to want to live there because they can send their kids to school, or near a shopping centre, right next to a shopping centre or across the street from a shopping centre. Investors seem to think that's a good thing because tenants could, I guess, walk across the street and get there. And a bus stop at the front or the train station right down the end of the road. I think proximity to amenities is super important, but not being too close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's busy. It's inconvenient. The school one's a big one. Traffic is mental at school drop-off every time. How annoying, particularly if you're a tenant without kids.
Yeah, if you can get behind the school, maybe not so bad, right? But if you're on the same street where all the drop-off is, it's just a non-negotiable. We won't even touch it. But investors think it's great. I don't know why.
There's like brawls at school pickup. I've heard full-blown road rage stories about how bad traffic in that drop-off sequence goes.
Hell yeah, it's like running a marathon every morning. I rage hard because despite schools putting rules in place around how this should all play out for ease of flow and traffic, no one listens to them. So you're like, move on, you're not allowed to park here.
So long story short, stop trying to buy a house across the road from school.
Yeah, it's just close to the amenities that we all love, but just don't be too close.
Yeah, like the 3 bears, right? You want the warm porridge, you don't want the hot or the cold porridge.
That is a great analogy. Just right.
Yeah, just right. Cool. So we've covered what you actually do, the eviction process, what to look for in terms of tenant appeal. Let's talk about tenant selection. What would be the 3 things that you would look at as the highest priority when you're assessing a tenant's application?
Affordability is number one. We used to have this guide of 30% of the tenant's income should be the rental amount. But then obviously rents have increased, salaries haven't increased. So I do know myself and my colleagues, we do relax that. But we don't want to see someone, say, spending 60% of their pre-tax income on rent because there's no money left for anything else. So it's definitely a guideline. And we want to see that people can afford the properties that we're putting them into because it would be unethically, I couldn't sleep at night knowing I put someone into a property that they can't afford. Then in a dream world, they have rental history. Very challenging for those who are first time renting or have forever been homeowners because they have no history. From the landlord's perspective, it's a risk because we don't know whether they'll pay rent. We don't know whether they'll look after the property. Sure, you could be a homeowner, but you can still be a slob.
Yep.
Because people go, oh, I'm a homeowner. Yeah, but I've been in plenty of people's homes and they're gross. They're dirty. So that's challenging for them to prove that they're going to clean the property and look after the property. And probably the third one, I think, comes back to me personally. It's my gut instinct and intuition, how the tenant has conducted themselves in the lead up to attending the open. If they've been rude or pushy or arrogant or aggressive, they're all red flags that maybe they're not the greatest tenant, because we're now generally dealing with tenants for longer. So we want to make sure that they're not only people we can work with long term, but it's that character judgment and assessment that we need to bring into the bigger picture of what makes a good tenant.
Mm-hmm. So the top three would be affordability, character assessment, and demonstrated rental history. They'd be the main three that you'd look at in terms of assessing a potential tenant.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget the time that in the peak COVID days, and it was like 60, 80 groups through an open, this one leasing manager came back nearly in tears because this man had screamed at her in front of all these people and she was embarrassed. And not only is that just not cool behaviour, but it's not going to get you the property.
No, that's the property manager who you're going to be dealing with long term.
Yeah. Yelling at them at that point isn't going to get you what you want. So yeah, don't be a dick. It's probably
truer words never spoken. Don't be a dick.
Be nice.
That gets lost on a lot of people, right? A property manager is still a person. A tenant is a person. There's human factors through all of this. And I've seen it both ways. I've seen some property managers speak horribly about tenants and dehumanize them, which I know personally that you are the complete opposite end of the spectrum, to the point where you can piss off your landlord sometimes in terms of advocating for the tenant.
Absolutely. And I have been having this conversation so often lately around the fact that property managers treat tenants like a second-class citizen, and it's just not on. We're all people.
100%. One thing that comes up constantly with my clients, and Pete, I'm sure it does with yours too, is property management fees. I feel like they're very misunderstood. How much should someone budget for property management and what's actually included?
I think that's where a lot of people get stung. All they focus on is what's the management fee, which in Adelaide can range from 7 to 14%. That's the only number people hear. But the fact is there are other fees. In terms of budgeting, in all honesty, I would say, depending on the rent and the situation, anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a year.
Okay, so we've got an actual dollar amount, which is good.
Happy to put it out there. And again, it's a broad generalization, but the fact is, as agencies, we all have a base cost of what we need to stay in business. All of the software that we use, all of these basic things, not even including whether an agency has staff or not, but just the basic things in order to manage your property. There is a set point at which we'd be losing money if we took on your business at a lower figure. I'm not saying it's the $3,000, but there is a number. And I think a lot of officers actually don't know what that number is, and they'll take on business and then wonder why they're not making money. And so they try and bring in more business. It's this whole cycle. Overload the property manager with more work. They do the wrong thing and it creates bigger problems. So really it's understanding that just because you might be paying, say, an extra $200 a year, you're actually getting a different service. So people need to not focus so heavily on the fees and just budget for the fact that it's a part of the cost of having an investment property.
I've had clients say, oh, but I can get 5% somewhere else. And I always say run the other way when they say that, because they're not set up correctly, and you can't run a business properly where you're getting all your maintenance sorted, you're having your incoming and outgoing inspections and your marketing and all of that stuff. Paying bills as well, which I don't think you mentioned before, where property managers will pay your council rates and all that kind of stuff too.
I have to pay someone to do that for me. There's a direct cost involved. I actually don't pass on to my landlords, but that's why I need a bare minimum to cover these costs. It's a business at the end of the day. What happens out there everywhere is that principals who own agencies are generally selling agents. They will go, oh, yeah, I can do that. Let's say my bare minimum is $1,000 a year, as long as I'm getting that for the property management side of it, because down the track, when that landlord sells, I'm getting that commission. So I'll take the hit now for the commission later. And that's why we have these 4 and 5% operators out here. But the problems that come out of that is you actually can't run a profitable business on those fees.
Yeah. I mean, it's all well and good until shit hits the fan, right?
And it does. It does. There's countless examples I could give you where not only does the revenue not cover the business costs, and so the business is actually in trouble, and then the sales business is having to prop up the property management business because they haven't done it right from the beginning. But what that looks like is property managers who are under-supported from their systems, so they're managing too many properties. They're doing everything the hard way because there's no money to put systems in place, and things are getting missed. And it's when things get missed, things aren't done properly, that it ends up costing the landlord far more than an extra $1,000 a year.
So long story short, don't be a tight ass when it comes to your property management fees.
100%. Can't say it enough. It doesn't mean that you're getting ripped off. It means you are buying peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. And Pete, I'm not sure if you've seen the same, but I feel like there's also just sneaky tricks in terms of property management fees and the way that they're presented. I had a client once that was like, oh, this property manager's offering a 5% management fee and this other property manager's offering 8%. And then it turned out that the 5% was 5% ongoing, but then there was letting fees, setup fees, admin fees.
I've seen postage fees. Who's posting anything these days?
Mm-hmm. And
just explaining his fee.
Yeah. And then the 8% ends up being all-inclusive and a better service.
Yeah, the old gold, silver and bronze packages that property managers offer, that's pretty much what they do, isn't it? It all costs near the same anyway.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say, that how it's packaged up and what it's called, we all have to make a bare minimum to make money. We're not in this for a charity. We are a business. You're still going to be paying for it, but it's where people think they're getting one thing and it's all these other fees that they didn't hear, because all they heard was management fee. They didn't hear renewal fee. They didn't hear admin or postage fee. And they get stung and they're mad about it. The all-inclusive fee is generally the best option for the investors, to be honest. I'd prefer it if people don't go all-inclusive and they take that standard fee package. It's actually better for me as a business owner.
Good segue there. You as a business owner, what got you into property management in the first place? And how did tailored property management come to be?
Oh, yeah. Most property managers fall into property management. They might start in admin and then they go, oh, I'll give property management a go. I did it backwards. I started in sales and went, no, I'm going to do property management.
Weirdo.
Yeah, very weird. I've never met anyone who's actually taken that path. But I bought my first investment property at 18, and I think I've spoken on this before, that I read all the books and I was going to make all my money out of property investing. So that was kind of the driver behind starting my property management business. Essentially, most of why I'm even in real estate is my first purchase was crap. The sales agent was a dickhead, treated me like shit. And I went, I've got to be able to do that better. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then same deal with renting out my property. It was just so average. And I went, I could do that better. And I did. And that's constantly evolving. Like the more horror stories I hear, the more I'm like, okay, how do we set up so that we're not doing that to people? That's probably the main driver in my business, just not offering the same crap that everyone else does, that we're doing it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been on the other end of it and going, that was not a good experience.
So basically, you had a shit experience. You went, I can do this better. And so you went and did it. Yeah,
pretty much. And don't get me wrong, property management's really hard some days. I love my landlords. I love my tenants. I have really good relationships with them. One of my landlords, they're having a baby next. I get to be involved in all that stuff. The nice part. But equally, I know my landlords, every time they see my name on their phone, they're like, oh, what's wrong now? I'm very rarely calling with good news. And same with the tenants. Sometimes I've got to be a jerk and say, clean your shower screen. But at the end of the day, like, my kids know that I get paid to talk for a living. I'm just chatting with people, and that's the cool part about it, working with some really cool people.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Pete, we've got a few rapid fire questions. Do you want to throw some of them Skye's way?
Yeah, I'll start.
I'm getting hot for this one.
Is self-managing your investment property ever a good idea?
No, everyone thinks it is because it's the worst one. It's a friend or a family member, and everyone thinks that friend or family member won't screw them over, but it actually increases the chance of that friend or family member doing exactly that. So no, never. And I also did the same. I managed my own investment for similar reasons, and it went spectacularly bad. I very rarely hear it being a good thing.
What's the real reason tenants leave good properties?
I used to say it was landlords, as in it might be the landlord not actioning repairs. It might be, I've heard a lot of stories of landlords just thinking they can show up whenever they like and being difficult, increasing rent. Like a lot of people will assume that it's landlords, but lately I'm actually hearing that a bad property manager is a really big reason why people are leaving good properties. And the worst part is that landlord would have no idea.
Yeah, I've actually had a similar conversation with someone not long ago. Good property, paying fair rent, could never get in touch with the property manager though. Just crickets on the other end. They needed maintenance reported, they'd hear nothing back. They don't have the systems in place, right? And obviously they must be paying a pretty cheap management fee for that to happen. But yeah, property managers are a big one.
And the one I'm hearing lately, other than the treating tenants like a second-class citizen, is just, the poor service and the aggressive and
eye-rolling
nature of most property managers. They're like that, not because they're bad people. They're overworked, under-supported. But the tenant's experience is like, I just don't want to deal with this. I'm going to go find a nicer property manager to deal with and move.
Yeah, they kind of start to dread the interactions with the property manager. So like the quarterly inspections, they just dread it, or just any piece of correspondence, they just want nothing to do with them.
Yep. Yeah, because who wants to deal with that negativity?
That's it. And the quickest way to, I guess, cut that out is to leave the property.
Yeah, because the tenant doesn't have any ability most of the time to ring the landlord and go, hey, your property manager's a bitch. Can you get rid of them?
Yeah, the tenant's just like, well, fuck this, I'm leaving.
Yeah, and that's really sad for both the tenant and the landlord, because the landlord would have no idea and the tenant's having to move and incur additional expenses because the middle person is ruining everything.
Got another one for you. What's the biggest thing landlords misunderstand about rental laws in South Australia?
That a fixed term tenancy means a fixed term tenancy. It doesn't anymore. So if you've got a tenancy ending on the 10th of October, that tenant can stay until they decide to leave. Landlords are really confused about this. They're like, well, what's the point of a fixed term tenancy? It does protect a landlord somewhat if the tenant were to vacate in the middle of the fixed term, but you no longer have the option to end the tenancy at the end of a fixed term, really. There's a very few reasons why, but generally they're not what landlords are looking for.
The only real reason is if they've breached a number of...
You have to have 2 breaches of a similar nature. So if you've got 1 breach for rent arrears, 1 breach for poor condition, that's not a reason to end a tenancy.
Or if you're selling the property, but you need the agency agreement signed, right? No, not anymore?
You can't end a tenancy to sell a property anymore.
Even if it's at the end of the 12 months?
Correct. This is the exact conversation that I have with landlords. You would be selling it tenanted, which no one wants to do most of the time. Your only options to end a fixed term tenancy is that you're moving into it yourself.
What about structural renos?
Significant renovations.
Like you're knocking down walls, it's uninhabitable sort of like level?
You painting isn't a reason to end a tenancy, or even new flooring, not a reason to end a tenancy. If you've got 2 bathrooms and you're renovating one, not a reason to end a tenancy because they've still got a bathroom they can use. Ending a tenancy is very, very challenging if that's what you're looking to do. And a lot of landlords will say, oh, I'll just tell them I'm moving in and then I'll re-rent it. No, you'll get significantly fined for that. And you may have to pay the tenant compensation. It's just not something I would touch at all. Because that's what that legislation was for. It was to prevent landlords ending a $500 a week tenancy and putting it back on the market for $650.
I would say it's probably done.
Probably still happening. And there's probably people navigating around it. But I'm not going to advise any clients to act outside of the legislation because it's very new legislation and someone's going to be made an example of.
Someone's going to be the guinea pig because they try to be too cute.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that come out in Melbourne now, because this legislation was around in Melbourne before it came here, and there have been a number of fines put in place for landlords doing exactly that.
It's interesting. I don't think I quite grasped that law either, to be honest.
Yeah, because they just think fixed term tenancy. And why would you?
Logical sense would suggest that, yeah, you'd be able to end it when you want and have good reasons for it, obviously. But even when you're selling it, I still can't wrap my head around that. Like, if you've decided you want to sell the property and you still need to keep the tenants in there, I actually just don't think that's fair for the tenants either. To drag them through a whole sales process.
Horrible for the tenant.
Yeah.
And that's where I try and have the conversation with the tenant and say, hey, look, this is the situation. The landlord wants to sell. You're welcome to live here under the legislation, but it's going to be a horrible process for you to go through. What can we do to make this easier for you? Because there's no guarantee that an investor will buy it again. If an owner-occupier buys it, then you're probably looking to move anyway. Why don't we sweeten the deal for you? We'll help you. And that way you can sort of get around it because the tenant's willingly left.
Got 3 more for you. We'll try and work through these ones a bit quicker. But what's the weirdest maintenance request you've ever received?
This one is a quick one. There was a tenant who was not born in Australia, called panicking that there was a snake in their front yard, like panicking.
Oh, no.
And snake would be considered a pretty serious pest the landlord's got to deal with, right? So we send out the snake catcher, who can barely get his words out when he rings us back. Says it's a blue-tongued lizard. It's not a snake. Oh, well, I can appreciate, though, if you're not familiar with the lizard, you'd probably be terrified. Yeah, that was a weird one.
What would you do differently if you were renting again today?
I think a lot of tenants misunderstand the challenge that we have in selling them to the landlord. So a cover letter is a really basic thing. Just like you're applying for a job, you can have a basic cover letter that you send for all 10 jobs that you're applying for, and no recruitment manager is going to take it seriously. But if you write a cover letter specific to that property, so let's say that property's got a stunning kitchen and you're so excited about cooking in it, that's the detail to put into a cover letter because landlords love that. So a personalised cover letter, if you're really serious about that property and you love that property, tell the landlord or the property manager why you love that property. It's really endearing, first of all, and it just shows a bit of extra effort.
So no ChatGPT then.
No.
All right, final one. What's a rental listing red flag that 99% of people miss?
I'm going to upset a lot of my colleagues with this comment, but iPhone photos, I think, are a bit of a red flag. And the reason I say that, it's so cheap to get professional photography. It also makes your property look immensely more appealing. If you've got a landlord who's trying to skimp out on $200 for professional photography, what else are they skimping out on? When you need a repair done, are they going to be nitpicking about it? I think it's a red flag tenants need to look out for.
If you're a property investor and you can't afford to put $200 towards photos, then you shouldn't be investing. That's my take on it.
Yeah, 100%. And because it speaks to the attitude towards the investment property. If you're not taking it seriously, you don't care whether the tenant is attracted to your home and wants to come and have a look at it. You're just like, oh, well, anyone can rent it. It'll be fine.
They're not treating it as an investment. They're already treating it as a cost.
And an investment property, though, is a business. And we all know in business, you need to spend money to make money. It's a very low cost that makes a world of difference to not only attracting a better quality of tenant, but it sort of sets the tone for how I think that tenancy is going to play out. So I wouldn't personally rent a property with iPhone photos because it just shows a lack of care.
Cool. And on that note, no dodgy iPhone photography. And Skye, thanks for being a really good sport and letting us put you in the hot seat and drew you with a bunch of questions. I will wrap us up there for this week. But again, it was awesome talking property management and actually pulling apart what you do on the day-to-day and getting some really interesting stories. And we will catch up with everyone next week.
Awesome.